Redditors who have hired a private investigator. What did you find out? My mother's dad walked out on mom, my aunt, and my grandmother when mom was just 5. A few years later, my grandmother died of a grand mal seizure. Mom was taken in by her grandparents, but she always wondered why her dad left and what became of him. In her 40s, she saved up a bit and hired a PI to track him down. Turns out he moved over time from Pittsburgh to California, where he wound up in prison for armed robbery. And so other violent crimes. He died in San Quentin Penitentiary. I think mom got a lot of closure out of that. She was able to see that life would have most likely been even worse had he stayed. At least living with her grandparents, she was loved and raised to fulfill her potential. Not me, but my friend, also a lawyer like myself, was handling a contested will. Normally, very straightforward. Anyway, woman in her mid-30s husband just died. He was in his late 70s or early 80s, can't remember. Still nothing fishy because hey, nothing wrong with an adult transaction where a very good-looking young woman sleeps with a rich old man in exchange for the use of his credit cards. Here's where it gets slightly concerning. 2 months before his death, he rewrote his will and left everything to her instead of his 5 kids. Around $35 million in cash and assets. And then it gets downright thriller movie-ish. Turns out, the woman is a 5-time widow. Now you may be saying, sure, that could just be the unluckiest, most pitiful widow in the world, but it gets even fishier. In all 5 of her marriages, the wills were rewritten just months before their deaths. And every cause of death was natural causes, despite not all of them being as old as the latest husband, and toxicology tests were not carried out during any of the 5 autopsies. But wait. There's more. It turned out that the widow was never home during any of the deaths, yet insisted the autopsies were carried out at the same institute. But wait, still more. Widow is also distantly related to one of the higher-ups at the institute. My sister, mid-30s, is adopted, and hired one to find her estranged biological father. They came back saying that not only was he still alive and nearby, but he had a daughter. Meaning she also had a biological sibling. Further digging from the PI uncovered that they weren't just similar ages either, they were exactly the same age. The evidence suggested that my sister had a twin, and her birth father had taken the twin and vanished. Huge, life-changing news. Eventually, through more incredible detective work, the PI realized that the daughter was actually just my sister. There was no other sibling. And they had just been investigating my sister the whole time accidentally. Needless to say, we asked for the money back. DL, doctor, sister hired a private investigator accidentally investigated sister. When I met my wife, she seemed to have a normal modern family. 2 moms, 2 dads. Over time it became apparent her stepdad wasn't around much. Holidays, birthdays, you name it, he'd pop in to say hi, grab a nap, whatever, then take off again. My wife's family thought this was normal, just the way it had always been since they were teenagers. He claimed to have a job following FedEx trucks around the state to prevent theft and drug trafficking. But I thought it strange, and started making jokes about him having another family. Well, I guess it got my sister-in-law thinking because she gets a favor from the PI at her law firm. Sure enough, he has not 2 but 3 wives around the state, and 5 other stepchildren between them. My sister-in-law breaks the news to her mother, who immediately changes the locks and files for divorce. They never speak again. Cold turkey. Divorce is even uncontested. As a fuck you. They also send the report to his other wives. Edit, I thought I was late to the thread, so I wasn't expecting as many reactions. Thanks for the gold. To answer some of the questions. Yes, polygamy is illegal, but it's not really worth prosecuting except to make an example of people. I don't know if my mother-in-law was his first wife or not. I do know that one of the wives had been married and divorced in between their marriage. How does it happen? Counties don't exactly share marriage certificates. His families were pretty far from each other. Was their wedding legal? No idea, I am not a lawyer. Probably the separation was just a formality for paperwork purposes, which is why it went to court, why it went uncontested, and why he never showed up again. I think he reached out once or twice, but she never answered the phone. And if he ever showed up again, we weren't told about it. My mother-in-law is a strong, independent woman of faith who just didn't know. He fooled his stepdaughters for 15 years too. Had a babysitter we thought was stealing from us. Luckily our neighbor was a PI couple, and they ran a background check for $10. babysitter had a string of driving under the influence, and a few days before a large fine was due, my camera disappeared. He also stole money from my kids' piggy banks. He sort of disappeared but was also really into Instagram, so I surreptitiously followed him. He started babysitting again for a single mom, easy target, and posted a lot of fun pics with this family. I tracked down the mom, and sent her a long email detailing out his whole scam. She said we were right, and it was clear he'd been stealing from her business. He has since gone underground, but I still Google him regularly to see what he's up to. He's been able to avoid arrests for a while now. Good thing he was gone before anything worse happened. Not me, but my grandfather did. He was separated from his brother when the Japanese occupied China. My grandfather safely made it to Hong Kong, and eventually to Canada. His brother made it to Singapore or Malaysia according to family friends back then. So my grandfather spent a good 5 years or so working with a PI to find his brother so they can be reunited. Sadly, with just a picture, and the fact many people died in the war, it wasn't much to go on. My grandfather is still alive and always thinks of his brother. It's his wish to see him one more time. Edit, provided response in thread below and copied here. Wow, thank you everyone for the kind wishes and suggestions. To let you know, my grandfather worked with this PI many years ago, say between 1999-2004-ish? And maybe a few touch points here and there in the years after. My grandfather was disheartened because he made many trips to Asia over the years thinking this is it. But it just cost more money, and got his hopes up. No clue if the brother married, if he even made it to Singapore or Malaysia, or it can be even outside of Asia altogether. Not even sure if he's alive. He would be in his late 80s now, estimated. He has not spoken about it directly with me, just with my mom, his daughter. If I'm being honest, we haven't exactly encouraged him to continue the search either. All my aunts and uncles tell him to move on and enjoy his time in peace rather than in constant yearning. I don't have the status in the family to overstep my mom and her siblings and start bringing up the past and asking him to consider a DNA kit. If I do, I'd have to do it in secret and consider the emotional investment my grandfather may make. He's not living unhappily by any means. He has a great life and quite accomplished with raising 6 kids to have families or homes of their own. We each take care of him. He has tons of friends, likes to cook, use WeChat to talk to anyone and everyone, travel, per COVID, and read. He does want to see his brother, but as time goes by the memory and drive becomes more faint and eventually the day-to-day life just makes it easier for him to accept the circumstances. Oh man, that's heartbreaking. Have you tried posting online? Do you recognize this man? With the image and a brief story? No. My grandpa is 83 to 84 this year. This happened when he was a little boy, maybe 7 to 9 years old. The reason why I'm giving ranges is because back then many people were so poor that they didn't keep track of birthdays. And my grandfather's dad had to make up a fake birthday for him when they arrived in Hong Kong. The brother is older by a few years. Not sure how much older because my grandpa doesn't really like to talk about him. The only picture my grandpa had is of them when they were kids. The PI had to rely on the picture, family last name, a few nicknames the brother had, and word of mouth from other Chinese families from the same village. It's not surprising he wasn't successful in the search. My grandfather made several trips to ESE Asia to do the search himself. Thanks for watching till the end.